At 5'11" and 195 pounds, not a whole lot of schools viewed D'Eriq King as a starting quarterback coming out of high school. He had a few offers, but the offers he did have were from schools who wanted to use him as an athlete, not a quarterback. King ultimately ended up at Houston, but played wide receiver for 2 seasons before transitioning into a full-time quarterback in 2018. D'Eriq King quickly emerged as one of the best quarterbacks in the country in 2018. He had 50 touchdowns in only 10 games. After a disappointing start to the 2019 season, King opted to sit out the remainder of the year and preserve a year of eligibility. He decided to leave Houston and ultimately ended up at Miami with the Hurricanes. Now, King has 1 year left of eligibility, and it has a chance to be his best season yet. Before we get to today's video, I'm going to ask you guys a quick question. Who is your favorite college football player of all time? I'll give you a second to think. Did you come up with an answer? Well, if you did, that means you probably love college football. And if that's the case, this is definitely the channel for you. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're new and turn on those notifications so you never miss a video. During his freshman year of high school, King played at Westbury Christian High School. His father, Eric, was the head coach. Instead of continuing his playing career at Westbury Christian, his father decided that King would be better suited to play football at Manvel. Originally, D'Eriq was against the idea, but ultimately, him and his older brother transferred. King has always been undersized. When he arrived at Manvel High School, he weighed only 125 pounds. His small size worried the coaches as they buried him deep in the depth chart, ensuring that he didn't see the field. Entering his sophomore year, King was listed at 8th on the depth chart. He wasn't given any real opportunities to showcase his talents during practice. Then, thanks to one play, King finally got his opportunity. The play call was 13 zone, a zone read play to the left side of the field. He tucked the ball and scored, and all of a sudden, King had the attention of the entire coaching staff. After finding himself as number 8 on the depth chart, King began to climb as he got more chances to showcase his skill set. By the time the first game rolled around, he was getting consistent reps as the quarterback. Shortly after, he was named the starting quarterback of the team, a job he'd hold on to through the rest of his high school career. In his 3 years as the starting quarterback, King completed 66% of his passes for 8,700 yards. He threw 126 touchdowns and had only 16 interceptions. In addition, he ran for 2,700 yards on the ground and had 37 rushing touchdowns. During his senior year, he broke the Texas 6A passing touchdown record, which was previously set by Kyler Murray, who was considered to be one of the greatest high school passers of all time. Now, you would think with these incredible numbers, a lot of schools would be at his front doorstep with scholarship offers, but there weren't that many. Only 7 teams wanted him to play quarterback for them. Other teams viewed him more as a wide receiver or as a cornerback. The problem with that? King had never played either one of those positions. Here's what his father had to say about that whole situation. The whole country wanted him as an athlete, but many of them didn't see him as a quarterback because of his size. I had one defensive coordinator call me and tell me they wanted him on defense. I told that coach that he wasn't a f***ing cornerback. He's a quarterback. King said that the majority of the coaches he talked to during the recruiting process would bring up his height. While in high school, even though he was putting up some video game-like numbers, his coaches would tell him that he couldn't perform like that in college because of his height. For King, that just added fuel to the fire. Initially, the plan was for D'Eriq King to play ball at TCU, not Houston. However, after seeing Ed Oliver, a 5-star recruit from the area, commit to stay local and play for the Cougars, King wanted to do the same thing. The idea of playing for his city was a huge reason, but another was the fact that he'd have an opportunity to remain a quarterback. His dream was short-lived as Greg Ward Jr. returned for his senior season after leading the Cougars to a 13-1 record. With Ward Jr. at the helm, the quarterback spot seemed to be gone from King. After some injuries to wide receivers during the fall camp, head coach Tom Herman asked King and his father if D'Eriq would be comfortable transitioning to play wide receiver temporarily, something that they were totally against from the get-go. According to King's father, Oregon was in contact with him at this time. Instead of opting to redshirt or transfer, D'Eriq told Coach Herman that he'd make the transition as he really wanted to remain home and play for his city. Now, mind you, D'Eriq had never played wide receiver up to this point. I'm sure he's caught the ball a few times at practice and whatnot, but he's never suited up and played wide receiver in a game. Now he was expected to do this at the FBS level, just a few weeks before his career was set to begin. The Cougars had a Week 1 matchup with the Oklahoma Sooners. Prior to entering the game for the first time, Herman pulled D'Eriq aside and gave him 3 words of advice. Just don't fumble. He listened to the coach as he made it through the first game as a wide receiver with no fumbles. For the game, King caught 3 passes for 28 yards. Over the next 2 games, King caught 5 passes for 28 yards. It wasn't until September 24th on the road at Texas State in which he really caught the eye of Houston coaches and fans. King caught 4 passes for 61 yards, including his first career receiving touchdown. He also threw a touchdown on a trick play and returned a kickoff 99 yards for a touchdown. Over his next 5 games, King had 17 catches for 111 yards with 124 kick return yards. His season ended at the end of October, and his freshman campaign was already over. Having never played wide receiver, King finished his first season with 29 receptions for 228 yards. In total, he had nearly 600 yards of total offense. Following the season, Greg Ward left for the NFL, and it was finally King's time to take over as the quarterback. Just as the season was getting ready to begin, King tore his right meniscus. He missed the first few weeks of the season and returned on September 23rd against Texas Tech. King would go back to wide receiver when he returned and actually looked a lot better. He caught 5 passes for 50 yards and a touchdown in his first game back, and followed that performance up with a 7-catch showing on the road at Temple. Over King's next 3 games, he got 17 passes for 163 yards and a touchdown. He even added a passing touchdown for good measure. Through the first 7 games of the season, Houston was 4-3. Their quarterbacks had a combined 9 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. After averaging 40 points a game in 2015 and 36 points a game in 2016, the Cougars were averaging only 27 points per game in 2017. A change was desperately needed to rejuvenate some life back into the offense. Houston decided to turn to D'Eriq King, who had only a handful of pass attempts at the collegiate level. They decided to start him on the road at number 17 South Florida. He had taken no reps in the days and weeks leading up to the game, but that didn't matter. King completed 12 of 20 passes for 137 yards and a touchdown. He also added 83 yards on the ground with 2 rushing touchdowns. Not only did he put up great numbers for his first start at quarterback, he showed his clutch factor. He had a long game-tying touchdown pass in the 3rd quarter. That was nothing compared to what he did on Houston's final drive. Down 3 with a little over a minute remaining, King converted on a 4th and 24, an unlikely throw through traffic that somehow found Corey Lark, and then, with 11 seconds remaining, scored on a 20-yard scramble. Houston came from behind to win 28-24, giving South Florida its first loss of the year. He followed up that performance with a win against East Carolina. He threw for 330 yards with 3 touchdowns and a rushing touchdown. 2 games, 2 wins. And just like that, Houston had found their starting quarterback. He was just lined up at wide receiver the whole time. Over King's final 3 games in 2017, he threw for nearly 800 yards with 2 touchdowns while completing 65% of his passes. He also added nearly 250 yards on the ground with 4 rushing touchdowns while averaging 7 yards per carry. Heading into the 2018 season, Houston decided that they were going to roll D'Eriq King as their starting quarterback full-time. And I don't think anyone, even King himself, knew what was in store for that season. Houston began the year on a tear, largely due to the play of their quarterback. They started the season 6-1, and King was putting up video game-like numbers. Through the first 7 games of the year, King had 2,000 passing yards, all while completing 64% of his passes. He had 23 touchdowns compared to only 3 interceptions. In addition, he had 9 touchdowns on the ground too. Through the first 7 games, D'Eriq King already had 32 total touchdowns. The crazy part was, he hadn't even had his best game yet. On October 27, 2018, the Cougars hosted South Florida, who was ranked number 21 in the nation. A year prior, King got the start on the road at South Florida, the game that led to him winning the starting quarterback job. And who would have thought he'd actually top that performance? King finished the game with 419 passing yards, 132 rushing yards, and 7 total touchdowns as Houston upset number 21 South Florida 57-36. For the season, King ended up accounting for 3,000 passing yards and 700 rushing yards, along with 50 total touchdowns. He eclipsed 100 rushing yards and 400 passing yards 3 times apiece. He scored at least 5 touchdowns in 5 of the first 10 full games he started. And all that came with only 6 interceptions on 345 passing attempts. King very well could have ended up winning the Heisman in 2018, but a torn meniscus against Tulane ended up costing him the remainder of his season. Through the first 10 games, King had 48 total touchdowns. Had he been healthy over the final 2 regular season games, along with his bowl game, he easily could have surpassed 60 total touchdowns on the year. After an incredible 2018 campaign, King was fully healthy to begin the 2019 season and hoped to build off what Houston did the year prior. But things didn't go necessarily as planned. The Cougars began the season on the road at Oklahoma. King accounted for nearly 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, but it wasn't enough as Houston began the season 0-1. They then picked up a win the following week at home against Prairie View A&M, but King was less than ideal. He finished the game with 3 touchdowns, but only racked up a total of 138 yards. Houston would then lose the next 2 games, dropping to 1-3 on the season. 1/3 of the way through the year, and it was already a disaster. Houston wasn't living up to expectations, and neither was D'Eriq King. Through the first 4 games, he was completing only 52% of his passes and had 660 passing yards. He had 6 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, along with 6 rushing touchdowns. Instead of finishing out the season with Houston, King announced that he would sit out the remainder of the year and take advantage of the NCAA's 4-game redshirt rule. At this time, King said he had full intentions of returning to Houston the following season as a 5th-year senior. "I came here to play football for the University of Houston, and that's not changing. After carefully thinking through this process with my family and Coach Holgerson, I've decided that the opportunity to redshirt this season gives me the best chance to develop as a player, earn my degree, and set me up for the best success in the future. I'm looking forward to being a part of the success of this program moving forward." However, there was then this tweet in which D'Eriq King's father confirmed that his son intended to transfer as opposed to remaining at Houston for his final season. It's the best decision for him at this point. Very, very tough decision. He's got a lot of teammates riding on him. Sometimes you gotta be a little self-centered and do what's best for you. On January 13th of 2020, King announced that he was entering the transfer portal. Just 1 week later, King announced that he'd be transferring to Miami. Some notable programs that were looking at King included LSU, Maryland, and Arkansas. The Miami offense in 2020 will be run by a brand new offensive coordinator, Rhett Lashley, who spent last season at SMU. In 2019, the Mustangs were 7th in the FBS in scoring offense. Since King graduated from Houston in December, he's immediately eligible to play, and will be the starting quarterback for the Hurricanes this year. Last year, Miami went a very disappointing 6-7, which was capped off with a 14-0 loss to Louisiana Tech. In 2019, the Canes averaged only 25 points a game, which was 10th in the ACC. They averaged 367 yards a game, which was 12th in the conference. With a new offensive coordinator and D'Eriq King at the helm, I'm expecting a pretty good year from the Hurricanes in 2020. Now, I'm not saying they're going to win the ACC or anything crazy like that, but I definitely think Miami can make some noise and potentially make a run at the ACC. Again, potentially. But I think it's safe to assume they're going to be a lot better this year than they were last year. Nevertheless, it's been quite the journey for D'Eriq King. After a really tough recruiting process, he opted to remain home and play wide receiver for Houston. Something he didn't want to do, but he did it for his team. Eventually, he won the job and showed that when healthy, he could be one of the best starting quarterbacks in the entire country. Now, what can we expect from D'Eriq King fully healthy playing in the ACC? I guess we're just going to have to sit back and watch.